How often do you manage to get time to stop and think? I mean, think for yourself, that is, not somebody else's thoughts. You know, you go to work, you get up, you go to work, you dash about, you have a chat with friends. You may go to the pub in the evening, or you'll talk to your partner, and then perhaps you switch on the telly, or you look on YouTube, or various other things that distract you. But how often do you actually turn everything else off and just sit and do nothing and allow your thoughts to ponder? I know some people will meditate, of course, and that's a very laudable thing. And that's really, in a way, what I'm talking about. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily having to sit in the lotus position and sitting there back bolt upright going any of that sort of stuff. And of course you can do that if you like. It's not for me to say. But I'm asking the question, how often do you just sit and do nothing and allow your thoughts to be your own? I think we don't do this enough. We are very easily distracted, and we've been deliberately so. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was the television. Before that, it was the radio. People used to tell me, oh, I put the television on and it's on all day long. It's company for me. Why is it that people are very frightened of silence and frightened of their own thoughts? It is their own thoughts that will give them help and advice and tell them interesting things. Inspiration, for example. I've been criticised for giving advice on here. Not that I actually give advice as such, it is an opinion. And people have a go and they say, oh, Richard, you know, but I made a video some time ago about where do people get their news from? And one of the places that I get, I wouldn't say it was news necessarily, but inspiration from, is sitting in silence doing actually bugger all. Sometimes it's lying in bed, of course, you know, before you doze off and write something down on a bit of paper or in a book, or first thing in the morning is another good time when your brain state is roused from that nighttime state to the daytime state. And in fact, you're full of inspiration. I used to write children's books some years ago. Many of them didn't get published. They were in various drafts. And I realized actually what I was writing was far, what's the word I'm looking for? It was not intelligent, but it was too complicated for modern children. And the references that I had, that modern kids would have no idea, because we've grown up so very fast. When I was a kid, the things that I would see around me are no longer here. And some of the adventures and things that I would write in my books, I realized that kids would have no notion what it is, like a gasometer and things like that. And I only mention that because in one particular story I had, it's a disused gasometer and the kids are mucking about in it and they've discovered some nefarious things going on, a high adventure type story. And then I realized, you know, kids don't know what that means. They don't have any notion of what life was like prior to the internet. So I stopped. But I found that in order to write, I would get up and come downstairs at 5 o'clock in the morning when inspiration was hot, and I would get tons of ideas and I'd just sit there. And some people used to say, oh, I get writer's block. I've never really known what that is, because I would get ideas would just flow. Now, I don't know whether that's a download from the higher self or something like that, but I would, or whether it's just training to say to the mind and the subconscious mind, I'm not giving up, help me out of this. I think the mind is incredibly clever, and the subconscious mind more so. Now, whether that's the subconscious mind or the higher self, it's entirely up to you to decide. Or maybe they are two parts of the same thing, or different, or whatever. But sitting in silence, I think, is a very important thing, particularly now, because we don't listen to our own intuition. We don't listen to ourselves. We don't listen and get very important information as a whole. And one of the reasons I say that is because we've been trained not to do this. In the old days, I mean, I read a lot of books about farming and stuff. I'm looking around to see if I've got one to sort of just flag up. And it talks about people in a much slower state of life. Yes, they were busy, they had things to do, and they had to things do pretty much manually. They didn't have all the high-tech stuff that we have now, of course. And they would smoke their pipes, and they would spend time talking amongst themselves, or like the shepherd watching his sheep in silence, looking at nature, being at one with nature and one with their thoughts. But these days we are so distracted that our thoughts are not our own. We have adverts. If you drive, I mean, driving is quite a good time to do some thinking, especially if it's a journey that you're familiar with and you're on a simple road like a motorway that goes on and on and on. And provided you can keep to the speeds and all of those things, and your subconscious takes over, you can actually use that time for a bit of thinking and reasoning and allowing inspiration to come to you. However, of course, people switch on the radio, then there's music, then there's adverts and programming. The television, putting that on all day long, is programming. Subconscious subliminal messages is coming into you. The internet. Do you find now that because we can just grab our phone, we can't have those moments to ourselves? You're waiting for something, and in order to not wait and be on your own and be with yourself, your own important self, to gain knowledge from perhaps another realm, we distract ourselves with the phone. We're so used to this, oh, I mustn't sit inside. I mean, we're not thinking that way. We're going, oh, this is boring. We've been trained. It's boring. We must distract ourselves, pick up the phone. It becomes an instinctive thing. And suddenly there we are. Our minds are being drawn to something else rather than perhaps what is absolutely vital to us and what gives us critical thinking, thinking with common sense, and listening to our gut and inspiration. And that is making time to get rid of all those distractions, to sit on our own, to sit in silence and to think. The best and biggest power that we have is the ability to think, and we don't do it. On the whole, most of us don't think. We think we do, and we even joke about it. Oh, you know, I've had an idea. Oh dear, you know, that's dangerous. But of course, everything that you see around you has been conjured up by thought. On the base level, that everything's been designed, any man-made product has been thought about and drawn and manufactured, and every element of that item has been manufactured. I don't know if you've ever sat down and looked at a simple thing like, say, here I've got an office chair that I sit on. It's a swivel chair, and it's got casters and handrests, and there's a lever so that you can make it go up and down, and I think you could probably get the back to go backwards and forwards, and it swivels. And have you ever sat, you know, meditatively thinking, someone's thought about that. They've thought about every element, how high it should be, where the handrest should be, what type of material it should be, how it would be secured, how big the casters are, how the casters actually operate so they work smoothly. All these different things that people have thought about and come up with the conclusion for an office chair or an automobile or whatever it is, you know, a fire, a wood-burning stove or a vacuum cleaner, whatever, or a computer, all these things. So on a base level, people think. But on a more spiritual level, contacting not just your own thoughts, but contacting deeper thoughts, perhaps really your own thoughts, your higher self thoughts, inspiration that brings you certainty, worldly wise, knowledge, that sort of thing. We don't allow ourselves that time, not enough people, not significantly enough people, because if we did, if we were to spend more time idly, you might say, sitting, cogitating, meditating, thinking, and allowing thoughts to come into us, subconscious thoughts, the higher self thoughts, God's thoughts, the universe thoughts, the source thoughts to us, we would be in such a better place. We would have known and could see the evil that's being outlaid for what it is. People probably wouldn't have taken a certain medical intervention because they would have been free thinkers. They would have analysed what's going on and thought, no, this doesn't sound right. My immune system is far, far stronger and better, of course it is, than anything that man can make so-called speedily at warp speed to inject into us that's never been tested. But so many different things. We would realise our own power. We would realise how fake legislation is. It's just policy for corporate companies. It's just policy that if we're not working for that corporate company and we take ourselves out of that jurisdiction, their policies, their legislations, their acts and statutes don't work for us. We see the veil that has been put in front of us that we have been told is the truth lift. Thinking and having time in silence and allowing the thoughts to come into us is one of the most important things that we, as these human being creatures, can do. And yet we don't do it. We're almost scared of it, which is ridiculous. And if we spent more time thinking and more time allowing those spiritual thoughts to come into our minds, we would get out of the mess that we're in currently.